locate that we've been looking for. In this room, we found the grandmother of these children, the daughter of people we'd already pulled out, and she was laid on top of her 2 grandchildren. And he rolled her over, and at that point, to try to pull her back towards the window, and he sees the 2 children laying there. Takes the smallest of the 2 back to the window, and he's fairly new. He's not a rookie by any means. He's been with the organization for about 5 years. One of our rock stars, trains constantly, and he's questioning himself as he's moving towards the window. It just doesn't seem real to him, whether he's picked up a baby doll or not.
Stay tuned. Coming up in this episode, a replay of episode 200. It's part 3 of a 3-part show where we learn powerful lessons from 2 members of the Chesterfield County Fire Department as they talk about an early morning house fire in January 2016 that resulted in 5 civilian fire fatalities, including 2 children. But first, let's hear from our amazing sponsor, Midwest Fire. At Midwest Fire, they know better efficiency results in less waste, and it adds value to every truck they deliver. That's why they have worked hard to implement lean manufacturing processes throughout their factory. Lean manufacturing means a lower cost to build, with the savings passed on to you. To learn more, visit MidwestFire.com. Hello and welcome to episode 320 of the Situational Awareness Matters show. I'm your host, Rich Gassaway. The purpose of this show is to improve situational awareness and decision making for individuals and teams who work in high risk, high consequence, time compressed environments with changing conditions. The SA Matters mission is simple. We want to help you see the bad things coming in time to prevent bad outcomes. Today's feature segment is sponsored by Gassaway Virtual Training. We now have 33 training programs for your members that are all presented virtually. Some of them are live events presented virtually, and some of them are pre-recorded. To learn more, visit samatters.com website and click on the Virtual Training tab at the top of the homepage. In case you missed it, I hosted a live training program presented virtually for the first time on Saturday, May 2nd, titled How Smart Responders Use Situational Awareness to Improve High-Risk Decision Making. If you're interested in hearing the playback of that event, just click on the Virtual Training tab on the top of the homepage, and all the available pre-recorded events are listed there, including that one. All right, let's jump into today's feature segment. It's a replay of episode 200, the final segment of a 3-part show where we learn powerful lessons from 2 members of the Chesterfield County Fire Department as they talk about an early morning house fire in January 2016 that resulted in 5 civilian fire fatalities, including 2 children.
The mother of the children that were in the house, I tried to talk to her. She just couldn't do it. She was on her hands and knees in the middle of the street holding on to her one surviving child, and she just could not talk to me. The grandson had disappeared, and I could not find him. And there just weren't any reliable witnesses, anybody who had it together enough, understandably, to help us out. And so I had no idea she was even in there. I still thought that I was looking for the one that they had already pulled out, and these 2 children.
Whose low air alarm was going off?
That ended up being the rookie on the nozzle on engine 2. So they drag, he assists dragging Miss Hudson out the front door, the truck company does. And the truck company has the presence of mind to go, that's the rookie's low air alarm. I'm going to stay right here on the nozzle with him. Y'all get her out. They get her out the front door, and we pull him out. And we pull everybody out of the structure, in fact, with low air alarms. And we are just not making an effect on this fire. And the truck company, truck 9 operator, informs me at this point that he's ready to flow water. My direction to him when he pulled up was to get the stick up and get water from engine 24 and let me know when you're ready, because we're going to flow. So we pulled everybody out, did a PAR count, personnel accountability, and went ahead and turned the master stream on. at that point and knocked the bulk of the fire out, while Engine 9 set up that 35 on the Charlie side to try to reach that window to get to the children. At this point, interior access is burned away. We can't get to them that way.
Wow. So keep talking me through this.
So we knock the bulk of the fire down, and then we go back in. Engine 9, firefighter on Engine 9 ascends the ladder on the Charlie side, and he has to. They can't set the ladder to the sill because underneath the window. Yeah, I could show you a picture. You're going to have to.
Sure.
It'll make a little bit more sense if I. Share you a picture here. Can you see that?
Mm-hmm.
So this sill sticks out underneath of this window, so we could not throw, or the roof sticks out underneath of that window. We couldn't throw the ladder to the sill of the window, so they had to throw it to the side. So they put it on this side, so the firefighter goes across in the ice across the slate roof. It was slate, wasn't it? I think it was slate roof.
Yes.
Across the slate roof and clears out that window at the top and makes entry, and he goes to a left-hand search, and he quickly finds the grandmother of the children that were upstairs. There were 4 generations living in this house, 5 people. So the people that we've already pulled out were the great-grandparents of the children that we were getting ready to locate, that we've been looking for. In this room, we found the grandmother of these children, the daughter of people we'd already pulled out, and she was laid on top of her 2 grandchildren. And he rolled her over, and at that point, to try to pull her back towards the window, and he sees the 2 children laying there. Takes the smallest of the 2 back to the window, and he's fairly new. He's not a rookie by any means. He's been with the organization for about 5 years. One of our rock stars, trains constantly, and he's questioning himself as he's moving towards the window. It just doesn't seem real to him, whether he's picked up a baby doll or not. And he hands the child out the window to the acting lieutenant on Engine 9, who at that point thinks that he's handed him a baby doll. It doesn't look real to him. His brain isn't processing that this is an infant. And they take the baby down, and it's pronounced dead in the backyard. And quickly he hands the toddler out the window too. He goes right back, picks up the toddler, and hands the toddler out the window. And again, that child's pronounced dead in the backyard. The grandmother was large enough and wet enough that he could not get her up to the windowsill by himself. Truck 9 and Engine 16's crew enter and assist him in bringing her out, and they get her to the window, and they realize if we bring her out this window, we're not going to be able to pull her across this roof and then down the ladder. And we've got the fire. We don't have the fire out by any means at this point, but we do have it knocked down to where none of this area here is burning any longer. So we go up onto the porch here and set 2 ladders side by side here, because we can get to it now, and bring her down those ladders. And she's pronounced dead in the backyard as well. But at that point, we pulled everybody out and went to a strictly defensive operation. The fire marshals had gotten on scene at this point. Were able to get the family to sit down and account for how many people live here and how many people were here tonight and how many can you account for, and get me a good count of how many people we had. So we felt confident. I felt confident that we did have all the family members out of the house. So we went to a defensive operation at that point.
So how many fatals did you end up having here?
5.
5. What we'll start with you, Rick. What would you say your situational awareness lessons would be shared with the viewers and listeners based on how things went, and the stress, the pressure, the time compression, everything that you were sensing and feeling? What would be some takeaways of things that went really well for you, or things that challenged you?
It seems like there was probably a lot more things that challenged me than went well. But the biggest takeaway I took from it was understanding that there was more information than I could process. There was just no way that I could process everything that was going on, from people screaming to running to not knowing how many people were in the house, where they were, to car tires exploding, to gas canisters inside the garage exploding. It was just too much information for me to be able to process all of it, and to just know that I needed to be able to focus on a couple of primary tasks that I could accomplish, which the main one being to complete the lab, to understand the entire problem that we were faced with, to call for additional resources that were coming, and to put the resources I have on scene to work. I need somebody to do fire tech, and I need somebody to try and start attempting these rescues. And that's the limited amount of time that I was in charge of it, thank God. But so I had 2 engine companies, so we tried to initiate a fire tech and a rescue. Both of them were failures, but I just had to work with the resources that I had, and I had to push away the people that were trying to give me information that I already had a bunch of it, and none of it was really, really accurate. But I had to tell them, okay, and I can't stop and have a conversation with them. I have work to do. I need to take a little bit of information, because as a young officer, or even an acting officer, I was taught that, don't disregard the homeowner or somebody that lives there, because they can give you valuable information. But, because otherwise you're just the moth to the flame, and I just want to go look at the fire and go, you stand over there and stay out of my way. They have valuable information, but I don't have time to get so much from them. I have work. So that lesson I was taught years ago, that was helpful in engaging them a little bit to get some information. But they had a lot more to tell me than I had time to listen to it. So,
and Rick, would you go as far as to say that perhaps this was the most complex incident that you served as the initial commander for in your career?
Nothing else that I've ever been in charge of comes anywhere close to the amount of information that I had to process on this one.
Mm-hmm.
I've been to some fairly significant fires, apartment fires and stuff, but there's never been the amount of people running and screaming, and police officers, and explosions, and inaccurate information from dispatchers. And not that it was their fault, but it was just they were going with what they had. Nothing made sense. The picture that they gave me of where this guy's supposed to be, it didn't make sense. The information I'm getting on scene now, there's 2 kids in here. What? That doesn't make sense. There's so much fire, it's not going away. There's just nothing was or the most complex thing that I've ever had to deal with, and hopefully ever will have to deal with.
All right, let me ask you another question. Have you ever, prior to this, or maybe even since this, ever participated in a fire training evolution, say at a burn building or whatever, where any attempt has ever been made to build this kind of complexity into the incident while on a training ground? Prior to this, had you ever trained with the barrage of information, the misinformation, the confusion? Have you ever trained in a scenario that comes anywhere close to reproducing what you faced here?
I've definitely gone to some of our in-service training where it's been built so that when you get on scene, there's a very excited mother or parent, or playing that role to try and grab you to get your attention, to try and pull you away from the primary job, and also give you valuable information. But nowhere that would even come close to the gravity of what I was. I don't even know how I would set up a training environment to try and to replicate the amount of information that was coming in at the speed that it was coming in. I don't even know how you would do it. So,
yeah, as I sit here and think, of how what value could come from this in developing training. A couple of things that you said kind of trigger in my mind, like the initial information provided on a training scenario, the initial information provided from dispatch on purpose, for the training evolution, would be information that would be very inconsistent with the actual conditions on arrival. So to create some of that initial confusion that, it's two very different things. That dispatch says, here's what you're going to have, and you arrive and you see that, versus dispatch says, here's what you're going to have, and you arrive and you see something very different than what you had set up in your expectations. So one of those things might be to kind of set those expectations such that they don't match the real conditions. And I think that, experiencing that in a training evolution, if anything, might help someone to, excuse me, not be surprised when that happens at the real incident, because it can be a shocker when you have your expectations in your mind of what you're going to be dealing with, and then you get there and you see that it's something different. And then also I was thinking, would there be a way to replicate some of those, like you said, like the car tire exploded, and then there was an explosion inside the garage. For those that are doing training, to create, maybe not explosions, obviously, on a training ground, but to create something that becomes an unexpected diversion of someone's attention. And I think instead of an explosion, you just like maybe take a boat horn, you just go, on a boat horn as somebody's, enough to make them say, what the heck was that? And some of these things, because what you describe is just this barrage of sensory input that is just so, if not overwhelming, certainly confusing.
Overwhelming is a good word.
Yeah. Okay.
I think that when we make training programs, command stones, if you will, or any type of scenario that we put officers through, we tend to let them focus on one problem at a time. And the scenario is built in such that once they address this problem, that another unit shows up on scene, or they identify this problem and something they need to do, and suddenly they have the resources to do it. I think that we need to start giving officers, command officers, situations where they don't have the resources to deal with it, and let them begin to prioritize, and at the same time bombard them with all that information, so that you have to block it out and go ahead and prioritize and figure out a way to get yourself organized. I think
right.
that's the problem, to get your brain organized to be able
right.
to
Yeah, and what Rick described was this kind of surreal moment of almost like not, like as you described, them handing out that baby that seemed more like a baby doll instead of a baby. And we do these, we do a lot of evolutions with Rescue Randy. And I wonder just out loud, and I'm not necessarily wondering about your organization, but wondering just in general, how many organizations have a baby version of Rescue Randy that they then search for and try to rescue and hand out a window and to carry down. I know, I see Randy as I visit training facilities. I see Randys, or the equivalent of Randys, even made out of hose, all the time. And they're practicing how to pull and drag this, large mass, heavy, down hallways, down or upstairs. But it's been pretty rare that I see a baby.
Along that note, when you talk about them practicing with hose dummies, our truck company brought it up because, like I had mentioned earlier, they had just practiced vent enter isolate search the shift day before, that they were actually having to do this at 3:00 in the morning. And one of the things they brought up was getting Rescue Randy, or the hose dummy more specifically, up and out a window is so much more easy than taking someone who's burned and wet and not dressed and getting them, and as tall as she was, big around, and get her up and out of a window onto a roof, across a roof, down. It's something totally different. And so we're giving them a situation to overcome that's not realistic.
Yeah, and not to diminish the value that comes from training with the equivalent of a Rescue Randy, but I can remember there have only been a couple times for my whole career where I had the chance to bring someone out, and unfortunately, every one of them, had a sad ending. At the persons didn't survive. But I can remember vividly one instance bringing out a lady that, in the moment, inside with no visibility, and her being wet and in a kind of like a sleeper that seemed to somehow magically just get caught up on everything that we pulled it by, that I would have sweared that this person that I was pulling out was 180 or 200 pounds. And when we got them out, they were, 110, 120 pounds. And it just seemed like we were just dragging the weight of the world, through this. it was so different than anything that ever actually had experienced in training. And of course, you got the stress and anxiety too.
Yeah, the gentleman we took out was like 225, 240, somewhere in there. Pretty good sized fella.
Wow. And you brought him down the ladder.
Well, we handed him out to one of my guys that was on the ladder, yes.
Wow. Geez. Joy, from the perspective of first arriving command level officer, assuming command from Rick, and then managing this incident through this kind of complexity, talk about some of the things that you learned that might relate to situational awareness, information processing, overload, shutdown. What are some good takeaways that you would want to share with other command level officers?
The biggest thing I talk about is getting the voices out of your head as quickly as you can. And by that I mean I had so many people talking to me that it was just too much input, and it would tend to lock up, for a lack of a better way to put it. When I play these tapes back and listen to it, I actually acknowledge radio traffic that I have no memory of acknowledging, and that's scary to me. And it was trivial information that I can only assume that it bounced off my brain and it went not needed. But I acknowledged it, and it's not like I don't remember how I answered it, or I'm not really sure what they asked me. I don't have any memory of it. So that's very, very bothersome to me, because what if that would have been something very, very pertinent and I missed it?
Yeah.
So one of the biggest things I can tell people to do is get that firefighter, get that person to stand there and keep people away from you. And as soon as you can, get somebody in a command position and make a division, make an ops level person, whatever you need to do to separate yourself from that so that you can be the IC. One of the things that I did wrong, I tried to do it right, but I did it wrong. When I sent my shift commander to the Charlie side of the house, and we had the conversation of, you go be the Charlie division, and that's good, right? I'm making a Charlie division and I'm getting that away from me. I never told anybody else.
Who's working for them?
Yeah, I never told them that they are working for the Charlie division. So they bring somebody out of the house and they tell me they're bringing them out. The TSO tells me they're bringing them out, and then the shift commander tells me they're bringing them out. Well, did you bring out one person or did you bring out three? And it's all that extra information while I'm trying to process other stuff that I didn't need. So that was a failure on my part. I did it halfway. So division it, group it out, whatever you need to do to get that off your back and get that aid. If you're an organization that already has an aid, I'm jealous. But on that type of call, it was absolutely necessary to have that.
Now, your aide, if I understood you right, did your aide listen to the radio traffic on your behalf?
Yes, absolutely.
And
he stood right there, and if I missed it, he let me know. Hey, Chesterfield's calling you. Hey, they're asking you, do you want this? Because I would be having a conversation or writing something or whatever I needed to do and would miss it.
Okay. Any other lessons or takeaways you'd want to share before we wrap up?
I guess just something to add. We both said a couple times here that things we didn't work, or things that we did were failures. But I just want to say the guys that were there that night, and especially my first engine officers that night, they did a fantastic job. And while we did not have a good outcome, these guys fell back to their training. They made good decisions based on good information that they gathered themselves. They kept their heads and they stuck to task. Those other units that were coming in, like I said, there were 100 things that needed to be done in the front yard before you ever made it to the back and to their task. And I think that's how we got out of that night without any of us getting severely injured. We did have some burns, but no one was severely injured in that.
One of the things that just popped into my mind as you were summing that up, Joy, was, Rick, when you have done rescue training, burn building or otherwise, but doing search and rescue training, have you ever done a rescue training evolution where you've pulled up and it was reported to you guys that there are 4 victims inside, 2 adults and 2 children, as part of a training evolution? Have you ever done an evolution that had that kind of complexity?
No, it's always been built on, we got a report of a mother and her child are upstairs, or a singular location with a problem, even if it is possibility of multiple victims. Not, we have 5 people scattered throughout this building, go have fun. I've never been a part of a training evolution.
To help you.
Yeah, exactly. Here's 3 people to help you. There's 5 people in that house. Now go do your job. No, I've never been handed that crap sandwich until January 17th.
Yeah, until you had it handed to you in real life. Like, I commend the effort, and I commend the discipline of you, Rick, and to even just get the 360 done is just amazing, given the amount of interruptions, distractions, how many things could have pulled you off task and prevented you from getting that lap done, and then being focused on the task in light of all of that varied information that you had. And Joy, I just can't imagine what it was like for you when you called Rick and he didn't answer, and you thought to yourself, this just went to a much worse outcome, because you thought that you had lost that crew. And to maintain a level of command presence in the moment of that kind of stress is pretty amazing. And if someone listened to the radio traffic that you played for me and said you sounded stressed, I listened to that and said, man, that's pretty calm for what's going on at this incident. It might have not felt that way or sounded that way to you, but
it's because they're used to Joy's.
They're used to my normal
They're
voice.
used to her radio voice, which is like smooth and a cake icing. Her like that, they go, man, Joy sounded excited. That's when I have to bring them back down and go, you don't get it. You don't understand what she was looking at, what she knew what was going on.
Right.
So, anyway,
that was elevated for me.
So on the
okay.
On the another takeaway on the luckily the fire service is addressing finally like mental health. On the mental health side of this one, I struggled with this. At times still struggle with it. To know that no matter what, I'm gonna say I, because I don't mean to say just I, but no matter what I did, whether I could have just not showed up and those same five people would have died. That was tough to sleep with at night. That was tough to swallow and to process and to be able to deal with. And luckily I had some good friends in the fire service to go and I asked some of them that work for us and some other agencies and talked to them about this is what I was handed. What could I have done differently? Because I lost many a night of sleep, and what could I have done differently? Especially when kids, but anytime somebody dies, I think you should process of what could I have done differently. But to know that 5 people died and nobody lived because we showed up that night. All 5 people that were trapped died that night. So I really, really struggled with that. I know I'm not the only one that had a hard time with it, but and I asked everybody for their honest opinion, and luckily I finally, after about 10 people told me it was a loser. Y'all did everything you could. You pushed it to the envelope of somebody would have been seriously injured or killed if you would have pushed it any harder than multiple units within that organization did. So it took about 10 different people to go, stop doing this to yourself, before I finally go, all right. Matter of fact, when she started making this presentation and she told me she was doing it down at the Chiefs Conference in Virginia Beach, I didn't even want to, I couldn't make myself go in there and even listen to it. And I was still processing it, and that was a year later.
Yeah, PTSD is alive and well, and I think as an organization we're addressing it well. We had folks show up on scene that night before these guys were ever sent back to the station. And when they got back to their station, they were there waiting on them and followed up with them the next shift day. And like he said, there's still some times it rears its ugly head, and I see it in the battalion that there's issues, and it usually stems back to this event, to this call.
If I get dispatched in that neighborhood and it's just listed as a cross street, my hair on the back of my neck just stands up.
Yeah, that day I'm on edge at work. And in fact, this year on January 17th, we had a fatal fire in the county. And it came in at 7:14 when this one came in at 3:14, and I instantly knew it. And the fact that 2 years later, I know it's that day, and I know that it's 3 hours later, and someone died, and it's still in the back of your head. So the guys are still dealing with it, and we still reach out to them. We have a really good peer support team, and when I see it, all I have to do is make a phone call, and they go and handle it. Our peers, and I don't know what's done or what's said, and of course I know it's activated because I did it. And sometimes I have activations in my battalion, and all I know is that it has been activated. They don't tell me who they went to or what for, other than that they had an activation.
Yeah.
One of the fire officers that was at the scene was riding along with me at one point, and this is 2 years, a year and a half, 18 months after, and we're riding in the car together in the battalion vehicle. And one of the times to have an awkward conversation is when you're not looking eye to eye. And so he began to talk about the call while we're riding down the road, and he says to me, "I'm sorry I let you down." And that was, at that point, I never realized that he felt that way. And I am so proud of those guys. And I am so in awe at how brave they were and what they pushed themselves to do for people that they have no idea who they are, or even if they were alive, and what they did, the sacrifice that they made that night, or could potentially have made that night. And to know that he felt that way, and I never addressed it with him. So I think it's important that our organization is dealing with it.
It's funny she says that. I had one of my guys. I have 5 people assigned, including myself, and we're a 4-man engine. So somebody's either off or detailed. And the guy that was off not riding with me that night, a few months later, him and I were talking, and he had like a choke up moment. Said, "I'm sorry, I wasn't there to help you." And you go, "Wow,
yeah,
that's tough." So,
well, it's commendable that you have a system and the resources to be able to assist those that might be challenged from the results of an incident like this, because there are lots of departments that have no resources, and the firefighters are left to fend for themselves, and they don't know who to turn to, and they don't know who to talk to, and they don't want to be stigmatized or labeled, and they suffer quietly, and as you know, sometimes to really undesirable outcomes. So credit to Chesterfield for being on the leading edge of making sure that firefighters have that kind of wellness resource available to them when events like this happen. Because it's what you described for me in this incident, in the video and everything, is that the windows, as I talk with people, I call them the windows of opportunity. The windows of opportunity to save those 5 people were closed before you got there.
Absolutely.
And like you said, Rick, if we didn't show up at all, it would have been the same outcome, because those windows were closed prior to your arrival. And once those windows close, really what we're doing, we don't know it at the moment, but what we're doing is really early body removals. We think, we're hoping, we're wishing, we're giving them the best chance of survival, but what we find out is they've, either succumbed to the smoke, or they've succumbed to the heat and sustained those injuries that are not compatible with life. And, it's credible and memorable that you got 2 people out of there at all, but also that both of them were not
viable.
Not viable. Thank you. That's the word. But you don't know that at the moment. You're giving them every possible opportunity to survive. But for those 5, those windows were closed. Now, the one thing I just want to make sure that the listeners understand too is, you said there was a 20-mile-an-hour wind, but I don't think we ever established from what direction that wind was blowing.
It was blowing from the Bravo Charlie corner of the house. So, and at times hitting the Charlie corner or Charlie side of the house directly. So with the garage door was up, so it was hitting that side, and at times, like when the sunroom failed, blowing directly on the back of the house with the front door open.
So the breeze is coming directly through the open garage door where the cigarette was discarded and the fire started, and the fire's growth was attributable to that large open door and the 20-mile-an-hour wind coming through that space. And then also impinging on the seaside, that 20-mile-an-hour wind where that sunroom was contributed to that failure of that space as well.
Absolutely.
Incredible. Well, thank you both for gifting me so much time and being so patient to have this conversation, because there's some really, really incredibly good takeaways here for the fire service, and I just cannot wait to share it. I tell people all the time who've had events like this, I'd love to interview you, and so few of them will actually step up. They'll tell everybody in their department, they'll teach a class locally, but when I try to get them to come onto the podcast, they're like, no, I don't want to do that. So whatever fear there is of doing this, you readily overcame that and put the need of the fire service ahead of any angst that you had, and said, this is a story worth sharing. And it really, really was.
I mean, it's not an easy story to share. It's not a fun story. But if nobody in the fire service shares any of this stuff, then nobody's going to learn from positives and negatives. I know negatives is what I learned. Those tough lessons are the ones that I learned the greatest from.
Right, exactly. Well,
Our
thank
fire
you.
chief allows us to do it, so we really appreciate his willingness to share what we've learned.
Good. Thank you both.
Thank you.
Thank you again to Battalion Chief Joy Nicely and Captain Rick Grazel from Chesterfield County for sharing your powerful story with us. Since 2007, SA Matters instructors have helped more than 1,200 organizations and 87,000 individuals improve high-risk decision-making, including first responders, industrial workers, military personnel, business leaders, medical professionals, utility workers, highway workers, aviation workers, oil refinery operators, and more. If you or someone you care about works in a high-risk, high-consequence, decision-making environment, then we are here to help to improve their safety and survival. I want to help you accomplish the most important mission of all, and that is to go home to the ones who love you. Normally, this would be the part of the show where I would thank the organizations that have hosted situational awareness programs, but since there is no list of programs to say that we have done, there aren't any to share. The pandemic and social distancing rules have caused all the live events to be postponed. So I just want to take a brief walk down memory lane and thank the organizations that have hosted programs this time last year. So last May. Pearl Harbor Naval Shipyard, just getting back from the Fire Department Instructors Conference, the Washington Fire Training and Safety Officers Association Conference, Waconia Fire Department, the International Association of Fire Chiefs Company Officer Leadership Series, the Maryland Fire Chiefs Association, the Scott Township Fire Department, the Fast 19 Conference, and the Buckley Fire Department. All of our programs, past, present, postponed, and future, are all listed on the SA Matters website. So if you're interested in seeing where we've been or where we're going to be going when this pandemic turns, just head over to the site and scroll down about halfway on down the homepage and click on the red box that's labeled Upcoming Events Schedule. If you're interested in hosting a program virtually or live when the pandemic's over, click on the Contact Us tab at the top of the homepage and I will give you a call. Remember to check the show notes for how to subscribe to our newsletter and how to follow us on social media. There we're sharing ideas about how to improve situational awareness, how to make better decisions under stress, and how to improve the skills of critical thinking and resilient problem solving. Well, that's it. Episode 320 of the Situational Awareness Matters show is complete. Thank you again to Battalion Chief Joy Nicely and Captain Rick Grazel from the Chesterfield County Fire Department for sharing your powerful story with us. Thank you to our amazing platinum sponsor, been with us for over 5 years now, Midwest Fire. Thank you to our feature segment sponsor, the brand new Gasaway Virtual Training. And thank you to our associate sponsor, Chief Miller. And most importantly, thank you, the listeners and viewers of this show, for sharing some of your valuable time with me today. I really appreciate your support of the SA Matters mission. Be safe out there, and may the peace of the Lord and strong situational awareness be with you always.
You've been listening to the Situational Awareness Matters Show with Dr. Richard Gasaway. If you're interested in learning more about situational awareness, human factors, and decision-making under stress, visit his website, samatters.com. If you're interested in booking Dr. Gasaway for a program, or if you would like to be a guest on his show, click the Contact Us tab at the top of the homepage.